Another week lacking significant precipitation across the state meant farmers could continue and in some cases finish harvesting corn and soybeans. But it also means that soils desperately in need of moisture recharge will have to wait yet again. On Wednesday, we talked with Bryce Anderson at DTN in Omaha about the winter weather outlook, growing conditions for South America's corn and soybean regions, and why this year here has been so dry.
One reason why it got so dry this year is that we had, in some cases, a historic strength La Nina in the Pacific back in 2010 and 2011. And actually, that particular feature didn't really kind of give things up until well into this past spring. And so the impact for Nebraska was that conditions started out on the dry side. Then actually there was a little bit of a switch into sort of an El Nino pattern in the Pacific during the heart of the summer. And El Nino during the summer is a dry weather pattern for Nebraska. And so we got kind of hit on both sides of the Pacific features. And the result was, the worst drought that we've seen in almost 60 years.
Explain to me, you did a little bit, but explain to me more the characteristics and differences of El Nino versus La Nina.
Well, with La Nina, the water temperature in the equatorial Pacific region is below normal. And with El Nino, the water temperatures are above normal. The jet stream pattern with a La Nina kind of leaves Nebraska on a very high and dry side. And with El Nino, you can get a little bit more dependable airflow into Nebraska if the feature is sustained enough. But during the summertime with an El Nino, we tend to see, again, a sort of a high and dry pattern with Nebraska not really in the path of a prevailing jet stream wind pattern. And so with those two features going on during the spring and the summertime, we were really left in just a pattern that did not allow for any real sustained rainfall to develop.
The question that I hear from a lot of farmers, or the concern is, they say this is fine for 1 year, this drought that we currently are in, but if it's another year or two, then we have big problems. So what are the arguments for and against that?
Well, the argument for the chance of this drought repeating is that years that the predominant portion of the central United States has a big drought like we had this year, well, those years generally tend to repeat. There's a pretty high probability of that going on. And that's happened almost a dozen times in the past 100 and some years. And that has indeed been the case. So that is a feature right there, that droughts, tend to hang around for a while. On the other side, there is the prospect that some of the benefits, if the Pacific goes into a weak El Nino this fall and winter, will start showing up in at least southwestern Nebraska. And we started to see a little bit of that during the past few weeks. And so there are portions of the state that maybe have a little bit higher chance of not having as dry a scenario next year as they did this year.
I know I hear a lot of climatologists say that forecasts, when you go out a couple of months, it's so hard to predict accurately. But when you look through winter, what do the models show could happen or is most likely to happen?
Right now there's a real back and forth going on in terms of the winter forecast, but I think that the likelihood is that this winter we will not see as pervasive a dry pattern as we did last winter. But I don't think that we're going to see much more than normal wintertime precipitation. And that would help out a little bit, but really not very much. And along with that, I think we're going to see a colder winter than we did last winter. Last winter was so warm that that really kind of blew through the roof as far as any real patterns are concerned. So I think that we're going to see both a colder winter with a little bit more precipitation. And as far as will this be enough to really make a difference in the soil moisture profiles, I think it's going to be very minimal, just because in wintertime you don't get that much moisture that really gets into the ground anyway.
I want to drop down to South America for a second and take a look at Brazil and Argentina. There are major implications there when you look at corn and soybean markets. What's a normal weather pattern for them during the growing season, and does it look like it will in fact be normal?
Normal patterns for Brazil are that the conditions show kind of periodic rainfall off and on in their major soybean areas. And in Argentina, they usually get a little bit dry during the middle portion of their growing season, which is January and into February. Right now, Argentina's had the benefit of some very good rains, and so they have good soil moisture for their crops. Brazil has been much more variable. Southern Brazil has been wet. The big growing areas in central Brazil, especially Mato Grosso, have been dry recently. They may get some rainfall here going into the next couple weeks, but they are probably going to be battling some dry weather concerns throughout much of the start of their growing season, and that's a big issue because Brazil is expected to produce 80 million tons of soybeans this year, a record by a long ways, and they are depending on good rainfall, obviously, to be able to do that.